Upper Room Ministries here in Dover, Pennsylvania. And this is Sunday School, where we are continuing our examination of the prophecies of the Bible, which have come to pass and which have not yet come to pass. We are still in the book of Daniel. We finished up Daniel chapter 9 last time, so now we shall begin in Daniel chapter 10. Okay. In the first 4 verses of Daniel 10, Daniel is described as being on a 3-day fast. It says that he ate no pleasant bread, neither came flesh nor wine in my mouth, neither did I anoint myself at all, till 3 whole weeks were fulfilled. And in the 24th day of the first month, I was by the side of the great river, which is Hiddekel. That's the Hebrew term. The more common term is the Tigris River. Okay. It is then he sees a vision of the pre-incarnate Messiah. It says, "Then I lifted up my eyes and looked, and behold, a certain man clothed in linen, whose loins were girded with fine gold of Uphaz. His body was also like beryl, and his face as the appearance of lightning, and his eyes as lamps of fire, and his arms and his feet like in color to polished brass. And the voice of his words like the voice of a multitude." Now, how do we know that this is the pre-incarnate Messiah? We just turn to Revelation chapter 1, and we read the description that John gives of the resurrected Jesus in his glorified body, starting in verse 13 of chapter 1. It says, "In the midst of the 7 lampstands, one like unto the Son of Man, clothed with a garment down to foot, and girt with a golden girdle. His head and hairs were white like wool, as white as snow, and his eyes were a flame of fire, and his feet like unto fine brass, as if they were burned in a furnace, and his voice as the sound of many waters." That's a near exact description. So that's how we can be certain that this is the pre-incarnate Jesus. Okay. He then explains to Daniel that that since the first day that Daniel started praying, he worked to come to him, but he was delayed after being held up by the Prince of Persia. But then in verse 13, it says, "Prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days, but lo, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, and I remained there with the kings of Persia." So it was a spiritual war that he had to fight in order to get to Daniel. But he did make it, which really is remarkable that the pre-incarnate Messiah would actually take it upon himself to visit a mere man like Daniel in this fashion, willing to fight through demonic forces to get to him. That just shows the passion that Jesus has for his saints. It really, really does. So let's hold on to that. Okay, it's then in verse 14 that we have the one and only prophecy of chapter 10. It's prophecy 25:95. "Now I come to make thee understand what shall befall thy people in the latter days, for yet the vision is for many days." Okay. So what shall befall thy people? He's talking about Daniel's people, which are the people of Israel. That's who he's been praying for and who he's been repenting for all this time. and it says in the latter days. So not for the recent days, but for the latter days. And finally, he says, "For yet the vision is for many days." So he's saying that this is to happen many days from now. Not in the future, but many days from now. So this is going to be a latter-day prophecy to happen sometime. Okay. We then move on to chapter 11. This is a chapter that's loaded with ancient history. Well, ancient history that had yet to happen at the time of the prophecy, but already has happened. Verses 2 through 34 prophesy events that already happened way back in the ancient times, whereas verse 35 and on deal with the Antichrist. So, let's get started. Verse 2. "And now I will show thee the truth. Behold, there shall stand up yet 3 kings in Persia, and the 4th shall be far richer than they all by his strength. Through his riches he shall share up all against the realm of Greece." Now, as we've learned in previous sessions, the Medes and the Persians would eventually fall as a world power to Greece. He's saying there'll be. Daniel is being told that there'll be 4 kings of Persia before they eventually fall to the Grecians. Those 4 kings are Cyrus II, Cambyses II, Darius I, and Xerxes. Xerxes is the one that's called the 4th, will be far richer, and by his strength, through his riches, he shall stir up all against the realm of Greece. So Xerxes will be the one that eventually falls to Greece, Alexander the Great. Okay, and then verse 3, "And a mighty king shall stand up, that shall rule with great dominion, and do according to his will." That's prophecy 25:97. That is Alexander the Great of Greece. Now verse 4. "And when he, Alexander, shall stand up, his kingdom shall be broken and divided toward the 4 winds of heaven, not to his posterity, nor according to his dominion which he ruled, for his kingdom shall be plucked up, even for others beside those." Now, as we learned last time with the prophecy of the ram and the goat defeated the ram, which the ram representing Media and Persia, and then 4 horns came out of the one big horn. That's 4 kingdoms coming out of the one world power of Greece. The one horn representing Alexander the Great, and the 4 horns representing the 4 nations. And those 4 nations, as we learned last time, are Greece, Turkey, Syria, and Egypt. All right. Moving on to verse 5. Prophecy 25:98. "And the king of the south." The king of the south here is Ptolemy the First of Egypt. Okay, so Ptolemy the First shall be strong, and one of his princes, he shall be strong above him and have dominion, and his dominion shall be a great dominion. So, and this prince is Seleucus the First, and Seleucus fled to Egypt and distinguished himself as one of the commanders of Ptolemy the First, which is why he's referred to as a prince in this verse. says in the victory won by Ptolemy at Gaza in 312 BC, the way was open for Seleucus to return to Babylonia. In 9 years he won the whole eastern part of Alexander's empire. In 301 BC he added Syria and part of Asia Minor to his empire. The Seleucid era was from 312 through 65 BC, when the kingdom of Syria was reduced by Pompey to a Roman province. Okay. All right, then we move on to verse 6, prophecy 25:99. It reads, "And in the end of years they shall join themselves together, for the king's daughter of the south shall come to the king of the north to make an agreement, but she shall not retain the power of the arm, neither shall he stand nor his arm, but she shall be given up, and they that brought her, and he that begat her, and he that strengthened her in these times." Now this is a very, very loaded verse. A lot's happening here. Now Egypt and Syria had actually been at war for some time, and they agreed to call a truce. And the way they decided to do it was to have Bernice of Egypt to marry King Antiochus of Syria. This was done solely for political reasons. Obviously, this marriage. Thing was, King Antiochus was already married to Laodice, and so he had to divorce her, had to put her away in order to marry Bernice. Okay, so going back to verse 6, it says, "And in the end of years, they, Egypt and Syria, shall join themselves together, for the king's daughter, Bernice, of the south shall come to the king of York, come to the king of the north, which was King Antiochus, to make an agreement and a marriage. But she shall..." all right. So anyway, all seemed well for the marriage, but then after a while, King Antiochus, he got tired of being married to Bernice and wanted to go back to Laodice, his first wife. Okay, which says, "But she shall be given up, and they that brought to her, and he that begat her, and he that strengthened her in those times." Well, long story short, Laodice wound up poisoning Antiochus and Bernice, as well as their infant son they had together. So both Antiochus and Bernice both perished as a result of that arrangement, by the actions of Laodice. Okay, verse 7, 2600 prophecy. "But out of a branch of her roots, Bernice's roots, shall one stand up in his estate, which shall come with an army, and shall enter into the fortress of the king of the north, and shall deal against them, and shall prevail." This branch that comes out of Bernice's roots is her brother, Ptolemy III of Egypt, and he would raise up an army to invade Syria as an act of revenge for what happened to his sister, and he would defeat Seleucus II, Laodice's son. Her son, Seleucus II, would take the throne after she poisoned Antiochus and his son with Bernice. Okay, continuing on in verse 8. "And shall also carry captives into Egypt, their gods, with their princes, and with their precious vessels of silver and gold, and he, Ptolemy III, shall continue more years than the king of the north. And then verse 9, prophecy 26:01. So the king of the south, again Ptolemy III, shall come into his kingdom. The king of the king of the north, and shall return into his own land. Okay, this is prophesying a second invasion of Syria by Egypt, led by Ptolemy III. Ptolemy III became aware that there was some kind of uprising against him in Syria, and he put a stop to it before it could come into full bloom, shall we say. Okay. Verse 10, prophecy 26:02. But his sons shall be stirred up, and shall assemble a multitude of great forces, and one shall certainly come and overflow and pass through. Oh, then he shall return and be stirred up even unto his fortress. This is referring to Antiochus III, or Antiochus the Great of Syria. And okay, so Antiochus the Great of Syria, the new king of the north, arrives on the scene in verse 10, and then verse 11, prophecy 26:03, and the king of the south. Now this is Ptolemy Philopator of Egypt. He is now the king of Egypt. Shall be moved with choler, and shall come forth and fight with him, even with the king of the north, and he shall set forth a great multitude, but the multitude shall be given into his hand. Philopator, so Ptolemy Philopator would defeat Antiochus the Great in battle. So Egypt would once again triumph over Syria. And then verse 12, and when he hath taken away the multitude, his heart shall be lifted up, and he shall cast down many 10,000s, but he shall not be strengthened by it. That's prophecy 26:04. So what that means is that he will become greatly exalted, destroying and oppressing many in his own land, especially the Jews. However, he was not to be strengthened by his victories due to the constant decline of his kingdom brought about by permitting favorites to rule or ruin. So his victories would not give him strength, I guess simply because he wasn't a very good leader at home. That's really all I can get out of that one. Alright. Then verse 13, for the king of the north, again, this is Antiochus the Great. He returns, and he comes with a great army. This is prophecy 26:05. And the former, and shall certainly come after certain years with a great army, with much riches. Okay, and then verse 14. And in those times there shall be many stand up against the king of the south. And also the robbers of thy people shall exalt themselves to establish division, but they shall fall. So what happens here is Antiochus the Great again raises up an army, and then in verse 14 it talks about there shall be many who stands up. Antiochus actually aligned himself with Philip of Macedonia, and with their combined forces they were able to conquer Egypt. They conquered the king of the south. Okay, and then moving down to verses 15 and 16, prophecy 26:07. So the king of the north shall come, again we're still on Antiochus the Great, and cast up a mount to take the most fenced cities. And the armies of the south shall not withstand, neither his chosen people, neither shall there be any strength to stand. So this is talking about Antiochus the Great coming to recover Judea. He defeated Scopus, taking several fenced cities. and none of the Egyptian generals were able to oppose him. But then in verse 16, but he that cometh against him shall do according to his own will, and none will stand before against him, and he shall stand in the glorious land, which by his hand shall be consumed. So here in this verse, it's talking about Antiochus the Great being helped by Jews who supplied him with the provisions and assisted him in reducing the garrison of Scopus in the citadel at Jerusalem. Antiochus showed the Jews great favor at this time, bringing back the dispersed and fleeing priests from all tribute. All right, so not just with his alliance wasn't just with Philip of Macedonia, but also with Jews to take down Israel. I'm sorry, Egypt. Got too mixed up. Okay. Verse 17. Okay, we're still on Antiochus the Great. It says, He, Antiochus, shall also set his face to enter with the strength of his whole kingdom, and upright ones with him. Thus he shall do, and he shall give the daughter of women, corrupting her, but she shall not stand on his side, and neither be for him. Okay, so Antiochus the Great had marched into Egypt, but instead of completely wiping out Egypt, he decided to make a covenant with Ptolemy, and giving Ptolemy his own daughter in marriage, Cleopatra. Okay, then we have upright ones with him. Antiochus the Great acted as if he were being influenced by nothing but upright views in his covenant with Ptolemy, so he was acting like he was good. That's kind of how the Antichrist will be in the latter days. He'll act as though he has the best intentions, but in truth he does not. And shall give him the daughter of women, again Cleopatra, corrupting her, but she shall not stand on his side, neither be for him. So Antiochus's plan actually was to influence Cleopatra and causing her to be a snare to Ptolemy, but instead she helped her husband and put him on guard against her father. That, that just reminds me that really is a foreshadowing of what's believed the Antichrist will do. He'll make a covenant, come in with Israel, come in with good intentions, and then break the covenant. Of course, in this case, Cleopatra put a halt to the intended double cross, but unfortunately, the double cross will go through as planned, as predicted in the latter days with the Antichrist. Okay, then verse 18. After this shall he turn his face unto the isles, and shall take many. But a prince for his own behalf shall cause the reproach offered by him to cease. Without his own reproach, he shall cause it to turn upon him. Okay, so Antiochus, after making peace with Egypt, he fitted out a great fleet of ships and subdued most of the maritime places on the coast of the Mediterranean, and he took many islands. So when it says he shall face unto the isles and shall take many, that's what that's referring to. A naval conquest by Antiochus the Great. And it says, but a prince for his own behalf shall cause the reproach offered by him to cease. So this refers to the Roman council who defeated Antiochus, causing him to withdraw from Greece to Asia. The Romans defeated him in Asia Minor, compelling him to abandon all the country north of Taurus. And thus the reproach Antiochus planned to cause Rome to suffer was turned against himself. Then in verse 19, continuing the prophecy, then he shall turn his face towards the fort of his own land, but he shall stumble and fall and not be found. This is referring to Antiochus the Great retreating back to his own fort in Antioch, and he ultimately perished in 187 BC in the war in Lariston. Okay. Verse 20. Then shall stand up, prophecy 26:10, verse 20. Then shall stand up in his estate a raiser of taxes in the glory of the kingdom. This raiser of taxes would be Seleucus IV, who is the son of Antiochus the Great. And says, but within a few days he would be destroyed, neither in anger nor in battle. Now, we're not certain if that's talking about a few literal days or perhaps days being years. Whatever it is, it was a very, very short reign for Seleucus IV. It was okay. And then verse 21, prophecy 26:11. And in his estate, this person is Antiochus IV, or Antiochus Epiphanes the Illustrious, shall stand up a vile person, the vile person being Epiphanes, to whom they shall not give the honor of the kingdom, but he shall come in peaceably and obtain the kingdom by flatteries. So, yes, Antiochus IV, or Antiochus Epiphanes, will obtain the throne, not that he was the rightful heir. In truth, Demetrius was actually the rightful heir, but he used deceitful means to obtain the throne. Well, that's all the time we have right now. We shall pick up with the story of Antiochus Epiphanes in verse 22 next time. Thank you.
Let you